Hello, everybody, and welcome to XenTegra's IGEL Weekly Podcast. This is episode 64. My name is Patrick Toner. I'll be your temporary co-host today, filling in for Andy Whiteside, our main co-host, our main host, I should say. And as always, we're joined by a good friend, old colleague, friend for a long time, Chris Feeney. Chris, I see you're out in the wilderness there with some fall foliage. How you
Well,
doing, man?
certainly 'tis the season. I just rotating through some virtual backgrounds and certainly wouldn't mind being out looking at some leaves, starting to get some color here in Raleigh. But yeah, it's a good time of the year.
Oh, absolutely. It's funny. We down here, we really don't. We don't really have a change of color in Northeast Florida. Is what I'm learning. But I had to go to Charlotte. We had a little tech conference internally. Spent a couple days at our headquarters in Charlotte. It was really nice driving around. I'd walk out to my car. There's leaves falling on it. Um, it was nice to get a little taste of fall there. But the second taste of fall I'm getting is your Zoom background, Chris. So
Yeah,
I
no
appreciate
worries.
that.
Not a
Yeah.
problem. I will say for our listeners, we just released a new version of IGEL OS 1108 to 200. And we added a feature for virtual backgrounds that is actually expands across any of the tools that you might use, Zoom, Teams, whatever. It's actually a unique feature to IGEL, and so I'm looking forward to playing around with that. That's been a one of those highly requested items, whether it's a blurred background or just your own virtual background wallpaper, whatever you want. So you can read more about it on our website, but exciting new feature that we just came out with.
Yeah, it's a great feature. I know there's been some registry hacks in the past to be able to accomplish that. So it's nice to have that kind of mainstream in the build now.
Yeah, it's been tested for well over a month at this point, more than that for sure. But it's finally GA. So for our listeners, feel free to go and download 1108-200 and have at it.
Yeah, that's news to me, Chris. So I'm probably gonna, once we wrap up here and I get a few other calls wrapped up, I think I'll be testing with that. Um, Very good. Well, we were joking before we got on here. It's been a while, right? So if there is anyone out there that's like a hardcore listener, they would probably be upset because we let this thing lapse a few weeks with just different schedules and just being unable to get our schedules in line for a few weeks. So,
Yeah, it's
um,
not like it's not like you and I we haven't seen each other. We've been out and about quite a bit. I would
yeah,
say quite a bit in the sense of I feel like we've had a rather intense pickup. I thought summer travel was crazy in terms of just not just us, but other things going on. I went to the airport the other day and tried to get into the central parking where I'd normally go, and it was completely full except if you had a reservation, which they went to this new reservation system, and I didn't, and so I had to divert rather quickly because I couldn't get in the garage. And of course, I'm looking at my watch. I'm like, I cut it too close today, so I had to hightail it to my normal out of band or out of the area parking spot, and thankfully was able to get picked up right away and get to the airport. But I was like, okay, I got to take that into account now. You know, there's a lot of travel going on, and just plan accordingly. Don't cut it too close when you're trying to get to the airport.
you're right. It is. It's back in full swing. I mean, everywhere I go, it's people are traveling more. Events are picking back up, which is great. I mean, I know IGEL's been doing the Disrupt all year, but I've noticed
Yep.
recently I did a Nutanix event this week. I'm actually wearing a Disrupt shirt myself here.
Nice.
Uh, did a Nutanix event in Jacksonville. Good attendance. People are just they're back to kind of almost to where it was pre-COVID. Probably still not quite there. I mean, I don't know if you're seeing that from your side. I'm still not traveling like I was pre-COVID, but it's nice to see it getting back to that, back to a state of normalcy.
Yeah, I think I am traveling probably as much at this point. Um, but they're not like I've only had like one where it's like a long week-long trip that was going to VMworld or VM Explore out in San Francisco. I haven't had too many of those types of trips. A lot of it's been like a day or two or whatever. So But yeah, it's definitely picked up. We've got a lot of events that we've been doing with y'all, and I just signed up for one, the user group in Florida. So I'm excited about coming down there in November. We're going to do a little workshop, a little plug for that thing, and then they have some fun and games at that Extreme Motor Park. So if you're in South Florida, listener, we'd love to have you join us. Reach out to Patrick or Darren Perry and get the or just check on the interweb or whatever, find a link to sign up for it.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm really excited about that event. And, if anyone is listening, if you're in the Fort Lauderdale area, I'm pulling up the date here. As always, if you can get to any of our events coming up, if you go to XenTegra.com, click on events in the top right. We're going to be doing a full, so we do I should probably I know this is an IGEL podcast. We do a full Nutanix boot camp monthly. Be cool to do that with IGEL someday. It's a really cool concept. And basically, they get all the users get a virtual lab. We're going to be doing one in person in Fort Lauderdale. We're going to be doing some extreme go-karting, which is pretty cool. So the event on that, it's actually Wednesday, November 16th. It's in the Fort Lauderdale area, Extreme Action Park. And then we're going to be doing an IGEL demo. So we're going to have an IGEL presentation kind of in the midst. We'll be doing a lunch in the middle. It's going to be a really cool time. So if you're in that area, definitely reach out. We'd love to see you there. It's always great to meet in person. So yeah, absolutely. But Chris, outside of the events, obviously they're picking up. There's some other things that we've been talking about quite a bit. You guys are talking about them at your events. We're ramping up to OS 12 in IGEL, in the IGEL world. Things are definitely headed that way. You guys have subscription licensing now, which is cool. But today's topic is something. It leads. It's almost a natural plug, a natural segue into OS 12. But it is a cool feature that exists even today. And I'll go ahead and share my screen here. But if you could just kind of introduce the topic and what we're talking about, and then we'll kind of explain how that relates to OS 12.
Sure. So it kind of leverages. We added for remotely managing devices wherever they were in the world, the IGEL Cloud Gateway. So when I came here 4.5 years ago, that product was already out there, and most of the getting up and getting a lab set up involved getting an IGEL Cloud Gateway and figuring out what that was all about. But if you've ever been through the process of trying to connect in, get registered, you usually have to know what is the URL. Like it's Chris's Chris ICG dot whatever, and then the port number, that type of thing. And so that's what the user, if they're manually having to do that. So, but we've had this thing where if you have a DNS, name, and most people would have something like, at something.com or org or whatever, registered domain name for email, you could actually leverage that to quickly onboard users if you have to, and just have them type in their email address instead of what is the URL I'm going to, again, what is it? And if you had changed the default port from 8443 to 443, just a little more, I have to put the colon in, so this makes it a whole lot easier. Just type in your email address, and then that leverages, DNS and a text record to find out where that ICG is located, and then get the user quickly onboarded. So our EMEA technical evangelist, Frederick Bratstig, who is an IGEL rock star, has put together a video and a blog on how to fast onboard. And so the concept, though, like I said, it's been around for a while. This is the user experience that you can expect, from OS 12 and the first time the boots up. If you have to register that device, you can do it rather quickly, and it'll be just what's your email address, and then it takes it from there, leveraging some things that we're building out. But this is what we're talking about. But I don't know how many customers out there have been using this. I played around with it for my first year here. It's actually quite cool once you kind of figure out how to make it work. But Freddie does a nice job just kind of walking through the steps involved. So,
Chris, I don't know if you can see my screen here.
Yeah, he's got a video here, just kind of walking through. So he has onboarded a brand new device, brings it up, and you get the wizard. And And so he, instead of typing in, I think that is using your XenTegra Cloud one, right? So you've got
Yep.
an email address you typed in, and then a structure tag and a one-time password, which is, what you would normally do, and you give that information to the user. And then it kind of takes it from there. I think with OS 12, it'll skip this second part, right? The structure tag and the one-time password, that'll be replaced by, another process involved, but it'll make it even more streamlined. But this is basically that same idea. What's your email address? It figures out where the ICG is, and then the rest of this is where you want that device to go when it comes in and gets registered.
And yeah, and it's really, and if anyone's watching this, if you're listening to the podcast, obviously you can't see it. But if you're watching it on YouTube, you'll see what we're talking about. In IGEL, when you convert a device, it's common. You get the welcome screen, you walk through, you set your time zone, all these things. This screen that we're at right now, it's a little bit manual today, and it's admittedly a little bit manual. It's still a great feature, but it's, as far as like mass onboarding, it's sometimes, some of the customer feedback I've gotten is, it would be nice if I could just like use my AD credentials, my Azure AD credentials. So the beauty, like Chris, like you were just mentioning, in OS 12, we're going to have that, right? That's going to be a really great feature for OS 12. All you're going to need is Azure AD or whatever. Is there anything else that will be supported outside of Azure AD? Any other public?
Great question. So I have been given access to what we're calling our pilot program. So we had an early access program to kind of generally test pieces of the puzzle. Then they went back in and kind of did additional work over the summer, and then they reopened it. So I've got a list of instructions. Unfortunately, because we were talking about earlier, travel has kind of prevented me from being able to roll the sleeves up in time. But Azure AD for sure. I guess as far as another identity source, I would need to confer with product management on that. But
okay. Well, we at least know Azure AD, right? So Azure AD is there. That if that's the one that probably most people are going to be leveraging anyway at this point. So yeah, just to be able to throw in, hey, Patrick at XenTegra.com. Here's my password. This service that IGEL has will find my IGEL Cloud Gateway management. Join me to it. All that's great. Today, obviously, there's you have to know the URL of the server. Structure tag is optional. It's a great feature. And then you need some sort of a password, whether it's a one-time password, a mass deployment password. So that's kind of the main difference between OS 11 and OS 12 as far as the onboarding goes for the for the remote devices. But the cool thing is, what we're talking about today, it bridges that gap a little bit. There might be a use case, and again, this is not a one size fits all. Not everyone's going to find this to be the thing that they want. They're probably like, okay, this could be cool, but OS 12 is really what we want. But there might be some customers out there that say, you know what? This is actually, I didn't know this existed. We were talking about it a little bit beforehand. I had used this in the past, but there were some things in here I had no idea about, including that you could use this publicly, which is kind of cool.
Yeah, I did it in my own lab when I first messed around with it. But in this blog post, the whole point is obviously 2 minutes. The user's got it set up, configured, and able to start using their Citrix desktop. And he explains sort of where everything is living in terms of the cloud, for example, and then walks through sort of what the process will look like from the moment the IGEL OS boots up. And this was a scenario where the device, again, is maybe they get a new laptop with IGEL on it, or the UD Pocket or something else, and it's not set up right. So this is versus, when you're trying to get a bunch of devices up and running, configured, and then you give it to the user where it's already set up. This is obviously not that situation. It's, here's a device, brand new, employee, contractor, whatever, fill in this information in a few steps, you're up and running. And he's just making the point that you can do some of this now, and then some of this will be streamlined even further in OS 12. So, but it leverages, technology that's been out there for a while. It's nothing, you don't have to go out and reinvent something. It's just leveraging public DNS and a domain name that you've already presumably own, and you can add a record to it that helps resolve where do I resolve the domain, and then where do I go? And the IGEL operating system knows, like, hey, if I get that in the input field for the where's the ICG server, it'll go out and query, and then the text record will say IGEL Cloud Gateway, and the operating system knows that I'm looking for this, and then it says go here. So it's kind of cool, because like I said, it's a lot easier. What's your email address? Oh, I know that one. That's good. Well, okay. Versus, it's not connecting. They didn't type the URL in correctly. So
right. Yeah, it's something for sure that is definitely more useful. The end user, just to be able to generate the one-time password, have a structure tag, just email somebody, hey, here's your instructions. The fact that they just put their email address in there, yeah, that's for sure. That's something they already know. It's not something they're kind of looking at one screen, typing it in the other. You totally remove that user error element there, or at least a portion of it. I shouldn't say completely remove it.
I'm looking at it on the screen here. We talk about the deployment key options, right? So part of this process is the deployment key is basically a password. So on that screen you had earlier, you type in your email address, that resolves it. You connect, and it knows where to go to find the ICG. And then the next screen would show the UMS structure tag, which is really just, hey, this device is going to get put into this directory once it's registered. And then that picks up whatever configuration things. But the one-time password, this is the one where, during the pandemic, one of my colleagues had set up a system and was generating unique ones per user. So, hey, getting you set up, you would have this, and you can generate one in the UMS, and it's really long if you want, or you can create one your own and give that out to each user. And just say it's just a one-time code, can't be used more than once, or you can do a multi-use one where it's used more than once until you disable it. So those are the two options. And then, like I said, the plan with OS 12 is that this second step here won't be required at all.
And of course, the one-time password is the thing that we as admins go, yeah, this is a really great idea. Security is going to love this. And then we go, let's just do a mass deployment key. And of course, totally just kidding there. We would never do that.
Of course,
wink, wink.
Security. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. But so those are your different options. There are a couple different ways you can do this. I've worked with organizations who are like, listen, one-time password is the only way we're going to do this. Other organizations say, okay, we'll use the mass deployment key for a period of time, and then we remove it, which is an option too. So if it's it usually comes down to security. But the nice thing, you can revoke that mass deployment key at any time, and it no longer works. So that should be noted as well.
Well, one thing, it's actually a feature. I don't know if we've actually talked about it. I have to go back and look at our archives, but and when you're onboarding a device now, you can actually from the UMS send to it the ICG configuration that you want. So completely removing this step, if you get that device set up and you want it to be able to connect through an ICG, we have the ability so that, hey, when you're in the office, there's a setting, I think, I know it's in the registry, but in the UI or whatever, but it's prefer UMS over ICG. Basically, if I'm on the same network as a UMS, I'm not going to try to go through the ICG to then contact the UMS. It'll say I'm already on the network, and so it goes that route. So, but what we also added was used to do it with like a custom command and just spell the specifics out of where the ICG is, the structure tag, all that stuff, the password. And so the user would never have to even see it. You just bring the device in, it gets that profile or configuration, and it's ready to go. So there are ways you can kind of whole streamline. And so what I like about it is similar to another feature we added recently was if you've got a laptop or device that has both a wireless and a wired NIC, you can have it so that it automatically switches. If I'm plugged in, like my laptop right now, I've got it in the docking station, and at home it's I prefer to have the gigabit network running. But if I undock it, it switches over to wireless, but it knows. And so IGEL has that same feature, and it's pretty cool. So you can kind of put all this on that device, but by the time the user gets it, it just works. That's the whole point here. But this is sort of that piece right there. If you're going to manually do it, let's make it easy on the user. And so, but certainly if you hear this podcast, certainly love to, we post it out there on LinkedIn. If you have been using this feature, your comments appreciated, certainly. So
yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'd be curious to know how many people actually do use this. It's been in the knowledge base for a long time.
mm-hmm.
Like you mentioned, hey, doing it the first time. It's one of those things. I remember being a new employee at IGEL and setting this up, but just really not widely used by customers. And I see Andy's joining as well.
There's the man of the hour. Yes, sir.
So
hey
we'll let Andy get
nothing like a podcast where one of the hosts joins.
Our good friend, like Mr. Whiteside.
It's like a surprise for the listener. They weren't seeing it coming, and it's a plot twist.
That's right. That's right. Whoa. What's that? So one of my favorite Monty Python episodes is the Spanish Inquisition. No one expects the Spanish Inquisition. And so the comfy chair. You're going to be put into the comfy chair. Sorry. Anyways,
well, we've completely lost all semblance of the feature.
Back on track,
Monty Python. But as far as how to implement this thing, right? How would we implement it? So let's say, Chris, you have your UMS in place. Obviously, you have your gateway set up.
Yep.
Let's say you're even today doing it the traditional way. Okay, I'm typing in my URL for the ICG. Really, to switch to the other mode, you just need it's all around DNS. You want to talk through that a little bit?
Yeah. So you've got a public domain out there. In the case of the article here, Frederick has @virtualbrat.com, and so naturally, as a registered domain, he's got email around that, and so he just goes to his provider there and creates a text record in DNS there. So it's not an A record, it's just a text record, and it's specifically IGEL Cloud Gateway, just lowercase there. And then you say, where is it going? And you point it at the URL for your ICG. This would be the URL that you would normally type into the address. You're just basically saying we're going to use the email address, and then it's going to fill that in behind the scenes or whatever, so it knows where to go. And you can see it's ICG whatever his domain there is, and it's got :8443 and then some other pieces there, but it just makes it a lot easier. So it's very similar to the Citrix user experience with the workspace app or receiver. You could just have them type in their email address, and then it knows where to go, and it configures the receiver. It's a very similar concept. And this blog is really about how to get functional with Citrix in 2 minutes, essentially, from an IGEL device. So, but yeah, it's just simple DNS text record pointing to that. And then he's got some default directory rules where, like we were showing earlier, where do you want this device to go when it comes into the UMS? And that would be your structure tag, and obviously, if you're a customer, it might be like, all right, this is for my remote users that are call center employees or whatever it is that they do. They get into this bucket and they get these settings. And that's really what the rest of this is about. And of course, deploying the license to the device if it doesn't have one. The UMS just automatically does that. So the device can be up and running, initially connects, pulls the license, reboots, and then comes up, it's configured, and all within just a few minutes.
Yeah, very cool. It's definitely having all these things. If you're listening to this and you're not automating this, default directory rules, that and automatic licensing, those are two things that I would say pretty much every customer I talk to, they have for sure the automatic licensing, but I would say it's probably like 50-50 that use default directory rules. And it's such a great feature. It's such a great way to, as you're deploying, whether you're doing it on-prem or you're doing it through the cloud gateway, to just automate away all of the nuance there. I don't have to drag and drop devices in different directories. just to have them automatically do their thing is really useful.
Yeah, and Frederick talks about a couple of things here when he's creating his rule. He puts in some criteria. So there's many different sort of configuration options when you're setting these things up. He calls out, for example, did the device last boot via the ICG, and if so, put it in this directory. And I think where he's going with that is probably like you can also say, hey, if the device did not last boot via ICG, maybe it's on the same network as the UMS, maybe move it into this directory or, something like that. And so it's smart enough to know, like, all right, and I don't know how many customers may be using it in that manner, but the idea is that the flexibility is there if you want it. So
because I know I jumped in late. Patrick, scroll up just so I can see the title of this blog real quick.
yeah, it's
So
yeah,
Chris, what's new here? Like, so, and you guys probably already covered it. I'm sorry to be rehashing this, but
no,
a
happy
lot
to
of
rehash it.
default directory and IGEL has been historically simple if configured correctly on the UMS side, and user just knew the basics of the gateway information they need to plug in. What's new here?
So a great question. We did cover some of this earlier, but what we were highlighting here is that the new user experience that's coming in OS 12 is leveraging something that we've had for a while. It'll simplify a couple steps involved, but the general idea is that we've had this in place. Not sure how many customers have actually been using it, but it's been around for a while. I've been here 4.5 years, and it was here before I was. But the idea is the same. The user just needs to know their email address, and that'll be the case for new onboarding experience in OS 12. Here it is in OS 11 with a couple extra steps that will generally be removed, but you can take a device and in 2 minutes, roughly speaking, it's configured, licensed, ready to go, in this case for accessing a Citrix desktop. So
yeah, I guess the way I would translate that is the Germans that write the IGEL code have great things in there already. IGEL has more, Americanized some of it to make it easier to digest over the last couple of years, and added a few things along the way to make it easier to digest.
Right. Yeah. So, but yeah, again, I think it's a lot of it is just, highlighting the fact that within just a couple of minutes, you could be functional. And what do you need to give the user? Well, just a couple pieces of information. What's your email address? Oh, I know that. It's easy.
Yeah.
And then, we were highlighting it earlier, just the directory rule, if you want to give it to them or not. And then obviously the password to connect into ICG.
Yeah.
So
and your comment about what's your email address, yes, but it's really, okay, who are you? And prove that that's you. And then here we go.
exactly. So there's an associated, I think, a video where he kind of shows from start to finish what that was. But Patrick had one earlier where he's actually showing the same experience going to the XenTegra cloud, I believe it was. So, but we were highlighting earlier that we've got a workshop coming up here at the user group coming in Florida, and this might be something that we highlight. Take a device from scratch and get it onboarded in a couple of minutes. So,
yeah, I think the timing, Chris, we're kind of gearing up to OS 12, right? What is the release of OS 12, by the way? Is it March?
Don't quote me on this, but I think the target is like the end of March or early April.
Come on,
okay,
Chris, when are you going to have it out? Come on, tell us.
We need January. Yeah. So,
great question, Andy. Next question.
March sounds like a far time away in some respects, but it's like, wow, that's right around the corner. So we're really we're really kind of.
I mentioned earlier, we've started our pilot, actual OS 12 pilot, whereas we had an early access program in the spring. So they went back into the shed, built some stuff, and then they are now in the pilot program. I have access to that, and so I'm going to try to get a device set up, and I'll bring it with me down to the user group in Florida here coming up in a couple weeks, and we can do this side by side. Here's the OS 11 experience, similar process. Here's the OS 12, onboarding experience. So, but yeah, I believe, I'm going to put the date in line, March 31st. I could be wrong on that, but let me put the disclaimer out there, subject to change.
Yeah. And by the way, you mentioned there's a video here. Everything we just talked through. So Frederick does have the video on this article, as well as a link to his own blog here. So if anyone who's listening, definitely check that out and look at the video, and you kind of just get, a visual of what we're talking about here, and actually watch it in action.
Yep.
So thank you, Frederick.
Great tech comes down to, can users use it? If they can't, then it's not great tech, no matter how good it is.
Yeah, that's for sure. And you made the comment, Andy, about Americanizing IGEL. I mean, OS 12 is essentially that modern, interface as far as the onboarding goes, that I think users are it's good. I think the admins will have a lot less gray hair because the users will so easily be able to onboard without instructions.
So for our non-American listeners, let me say it like this. Americanizing also means dumbing it down so that people will use it.
That's true. This is true. We don't like things that are complicated.
My rule of thumb was, where was that show? Something about a fifth grader. So if I was trying to explain something that was obviously there's a lot going on behind the scenes, like, all right, how can if a fifth grader can understand this, that's my baseline, right?
Yeah.
And so, I don't know why I picked fifth grade. Maybe it was because my wife at some point in time was teaching fifth grade.
The show was, "Are You Smarter Than a Fifth Grader?"
That's right. Yeah, that's right.
And the truth of most people, especially in the U.S., is you kind of stop really learning by the fifth grade, and you could literally stop there and go on. And most of your life, you could live very successfully with a fifth grade education in a world where things are made simple to consume.
Yeah, and you think about the tech that a fifth grader actually gets their hands on these days. It's I remember even less. I remember we were dropping our daughter off for summer camp, and I'm literally watching while we're standing in line to check in or whatever. One of the families had given their younger child an iPad, and this thing just watching the hands move up. And I was like, "Holy moly, this kid!" It's like, how old is this kid? Like 2-3 years old? Just a whiz kid on this thing. Just
we could all be Jethro Bodine. You get that reference?
Well, I heard Jethro, and all of a sudden I thought of Beverly Hillbillies. So, if I could go out in the woods back here and strike oil.
Big joke is he was the most educated person in the family because he had a fifth grade education.
Well, our fifth graders, to Chris's point, they've been practicing on world domination with Minecraft and Roblox and all these games. So they should go pretty well in a few years.
That's awesome. I love it.
Well, you jokingly say that, but the tech that even a kindergartner or first grader has, it becomes natural, like Chris was pointing out. Whereas people my age, 50 or slightly younger or slightly older, either embrace it because it's been made simple, or they're scared to death of it because they clicked wrong once and they'll never do it again.
Yeah. Yeah, it really does. I joke about it with my wife. It's like sometimes I attribute even my tech career to playing video games as a kid, right? A lot of it's logical, solving problems. It kind of gets you to, in a way, it's helpful. It was helpful to be, playing video games as a kid when I'm doing things now.
Well, Patrick, was that video games like when I was a kid where when you died 3 times, you had to start over from the beginning and then at some point cheat codes showed up and you could fast forward back to some level? Or is it video games like it is today where it's just a journey that you're on and you're just completing the journey no matter what happened to you in the previous frame?
Well, I went through that transition when I was young kid. Yeah, it was like you're describing. And then eventually towards the end of my gaming career, it was the other way. So yeah, it's interesting stuff.
So which one's the right lesson, that you have to work hard and start over, or that you just get to keep going no matter where you left off? I don't actually know the answer to my own question.
That's a great question. It's funny because at Disrupted Nashville, I was having a hallway conversation about, I think we were talking about Bo Jackson originally, and I went to Tecmo Bowl and I said, the only reason you picked the Oakland Raiders in that game was because of Bo Jackson.
Of course.
But, you're just hoping for that sweep play that just, then he just powers past people and just runs them over. So anyway, but to games like Super Mario Brothers, you're trying to get to level 10 or whatever, you keep going, you die, and you go back, you start all over again. I don't know.
And that's for me. I can't play modern day games because I want the challenge of being able to continue on based on what I earned. When I say that to my kids, especially my two sons, one's 20 and one's 13, it totally doesn't resonate with them.
Yeah,
awesome.
No, that's an interesting perspective there. How things have changed in that way. Well, I guess, we'll know some of the answers to these things in about 20, 30 years if the young generation builds, the best cities ever made because of their Minecraft experience and things like that. So we'll, TBD to the listener. But
so that's kind of a morbid thought for me. And
I was going there too. I was like, oh my gosh.
One shot at this, like the old video games versus what kids are being taught today, that you live forever and maybe the meta world. Yeah, I'm not sure which one is the right way to educate people and raise them.
Well, I'll leave this. Kids, get outside and explore the great outdoors, right?
There you go.
Get off your phones.
Get
off your phones. Go play. Go scrape your knees. Rub some dirt on it, and enjoy things like this, nature, the lake and the reflection and the fake virtual background thing. So
take a hike in the woods and listen to our podcast. If
that'd be awesome. That's a good way to end this thing.
If anybody under the age of 30 actually listens to this podcast, but maybe. I hope so.
Well, let's promote the heck out of it and see if we can get those numbers up. So.
Well, here's the flip side of this argument. In 30 years from now, this podcast will still live on YouTube and still live on Buzzsprout. So think about that.
Be careful what we say.
No.
Well, so if you're listening to this in the woods, hopefully you're perplexed enough and thinking deeply about these things now. So enjoy the rest of your hike if that's you. Hopefully we're giving you some things to think about. I'm actually trying to grasp some of this as we're talking about it. So it's great stuff for sure.
I'm not sure we.
Sum it up for you guys. Today is October 21st, 2022. In my world, I'm in Central Time Zone right now, so it's roughly 8:30. You got X amount of today left. Go live it.
There you go.
There you go.
I'm gonna go get my eyes checked now, and then I'm gonna go explore the world after that. So.
All right. Well, I think that's a pretty good note to end on here. It's just seize the day. I like that the words to end on that, Andy. We kind of went way off track here, but hopefully there was some kind of a logical track here if you kind of listen through it again.
I don't know this way off track because we don't need to spend time onboarding. We need to get onboarded quickly so we can get back to living. That's why I brought up all that up.
That's why you're here, Andy.
That is because I would have never made that connection there. So
full circle. We are here. We're back to where we were needed to be.
And to be honest, that's the American way, right? We take really good tech like we've got here from IGEL out of Germany, and we make it so where it's more digestible so that the tech doesn't get in the way.
Make it invisible.
Yep.
All right.
Always
a pleasure, gentlemen.
Yeah, guys. Well, again, and for anyone listening, just one last quick plug here before we wrap up. Again, we're going to be down in Fort Lauderdale. Tons of events coming up at XenTegra. Please go to XenTegra.com. Check out our events page. And if you're in the Fort Lauderdale area, Chris and I will be potentially Andy too. Andy, will you be down there at the Florida User Group?
I want to be. I don't know yet. I can't tell you where I'm going to be Monday at this very time.
Got it. All right. So you may meet Andy as well if you're down there. Chris and I will be there for sure. It's going to be a really great event. Talking through some awesome technology, Nutanix, IGEL. We'll have a few other vendors there, kind of, basically showing some of their new technology as well. So definitely check that out. Sign up. And as always, guys, really appreciate, taking the time to listen. Hopefully you learned something today. Guys, thanks again for joining. And we'll see you on the next one.
All righty. Take care.
Thanks.
Thanks, guys.
All right.
I think it's still
Have-
recording.